The sun, a molten coin, slipped behind a manicured ridge of Harmony Glade, casting long, geometric shadows across the meticulously planned cul-de-sacs. Mrs. Eleanor Ainsworth, a woman whose floor-print dresses mirrored the precisely calibrated hues of her petunias, adjusted her spectacles and sighed. It was Tuesday, the day of the bi-weekly HOA meeting, a ritual as predictable and comforting as her afternoon Earl Grey. Tonight, however, a tremor of unease rippled through the air, a subtle dissonance in the otherwise harmonious symphony of suburban life. The Harmony Glade Homeowners Association, or HEHOA, was the beating heart of their community, a collective of well-intentioned, albeit sometimes overly enthusiastic, residents dedicated to preserving the pristine aesthetic and unwavering conformity that defined their little slice of paradise. The community was a testament to order. Identical mailboxes stood sentinel at the end of each driveway, lawns were trimmed to a uniform 3 inches, and every house sported a precisely positioned, regulation-approved porch light. Tonight's meeting was held in the community clubhouse, a building that resembled a slightly oversized beige-painted birdhouse. Inside, the air crackled with a hushed anticipation of unspoken grievances. The long, polished table reflected the fluorescent lights, casting a sterile glow on the faces of the assembled members. Mrs. Ainsworth, as the esteemed secretary, sat at the head, her meticulously organized binder open before her. Across from her sat Mr. Bartholomew Finch, the HOA president, a man whose bald head gleamed with sheen of nervous perspiration. He cleared his throat, a sound that echoed unnaturally in the quiet room. "Good evening, everyone. Let's get started. As you know, we have several important items on the agenda tonight. The first item was a perennial debate over the color of the new playground equipment. Mrs. Ainsworth had meticulously compiled a spreadsheet comparing the relative merits of sunshine yellow versus meadow green, complete with Pantone swatches and resident feedback. The discussion, as always, was heated. Mr. Finch, ever the diplomat, attempted to mediate, but the passions of the playground color debate ran deep. Then came the issue of the rogue bird feeder. Mrs. Mildred Higgins, a woman known for her love of finches and her equally fierce adherence to the HOA bylaws, had installed a bird feeder in her backyard. While she argued that it brought joy to her feathered friends and added a touch of nature to the landscape, several residents complained that it attracted squirrels, which, in turn, dug up their meticulously manicured flower beds. The debate raged, punctuated by Mrs. Higgins's indignant pronouncements about the tyranny of the lawn. As the meeting wore on, the list of grievances grew longer. There were complaints about the length of Mr. Henderson's hedges, the placement of Mrs. Peterson's garden gnomes, and the alleged noise emanating from the Smith garage during late-night woodworking sessions. Each issue, however trivial, was dissected and debated with the intensity of a Supreme Court hearing. Then a new item was raised, one that sent a palpable shiver through the room: the unauthorized installation of a solar panel. Mr. George Miller, a retired engineer with a penchant for technological innovation, had installed a single solar panel on his roof, discreetly positioned to maximize sunlight. He argued that it was an environmentally friendly addition that reduced his energy bill. However, several residents, including Mr. Finch himself, viewed it as a blatant violation of the community's aesthetic standards. "It's an eyesore," Mr. Finch declared, his voice trembling slightly. "It disrupts the uniformity of our rooftops. It's unharmonious." Mr. Miller, a man of quiet determination, countered with a well-reasoned argument about the benefits of renewable energy and the importance of individual expression. He pointed out that the solar panel was barely visible from the street, and that it did not detract from the overall appearance of his house. The debate grew increasingly heated. Mrs. Ainsworth, ever the meticulous recorder, noted down every word, every nuance of emotion. She observed the subtle shifts in body language, the tightening of jaws, the furrowing of brows. She recognized the underlying tension that permeated the room, a tension that went beyond the immediate issue of the solar panel. It was a tension that spoke to the very essence of Harmony Glade, a community built on the foundation of uniformity and conformity. The residents, in their pursuit of an idealized suburban paradise, had inadvertently created a system that stifled individuality and creativity. They had become so fixated on maintaining the perfect facade that they had lost sight of the human element. the messy, unpredictable, and ultimately beautiful aspects of life. The solar panel, in its unassuming way, had become a symbol of this conflict. It represented the clash between the desire for order and the yearning for individuality, between the comfort of conformity and the courage to be different. As the meeting drew to a close, Mr. Finch, sensing the growing unease, proposed a compromise. He suggested that Mr. Miller submit a formal request for a variance to the HOA bylaws, outlining the specific benefits of his solar panel and its minimal impact on the community. The request would then be reviewed by a committee of residents, who would make a recommendation to the full board. Mr. Miller, though reluctant to submit to further scrutiny, agreed to the compromise. He recognized that, in a community like Harmony Glade, change could only come through a process of negotiation and compromise. The meeting adjourned and the residents filed out clubhouse, their faces etched with a mixture of exhaustion and unresolved tension. Mrs. Ainsworth, as she locked up the building, gazed out at the darkened cul-de-sacs, the rows of identical houses illuminated by their regulation-approved porch lights. She wondered if Harmony Glade could ever truly reconcile its desire for order with the inevitable messiness of human life. The next day, Mr. Miller submitted his request for a variance, accompanied by a detailed report on the environmental benefits of solar energy and a series of photographs demonstrating the discreet placement of his panel. The request was forwarded to the newly formed Variance Review Committee, a group of 5 residents chosen for their perceived objectivity and commitment to the HOA bylaws. The committee, led by Mrs. Ainsworth herself, embarked on a meticulous investigation. They consulted with experts on solar energy, reviewed architectural guidelines, and even conducted a site visit to Mr. Miller's house, carefully examining the solar panel from every angle. The deliberations were lengthy and intense. The committee members grappled with the competing values of conformity and innovation, uniformity and individuality. They debated the meaning of aesthetic harmony and the limits of individual expression. Meanwhile, the residents of Harmony Glade watched with bated breath, their opinions divided. Some supported Mr. Miller's right to install his solar panel, viewing it as a symbol of progress and sustainability. Others remained steadfast in their belief that it violated the community's aesthetic standards and threatened the sanctity of their suburban paradise. The tension in the community grew, fueled by whispered conversations, anonymous notes, and heated debates on the neighborhood online forum. The solar panel had become a lightning rod, attracting all the latent anxieties and resentments that had been simmering beneath the surface of Harmony Glade's seemingly tranquil facade. Finally, after weeks of deliberation, the Variance Review Committee reached a decision. Mrs. Ainsworth, with a sense of solemnity, presented the committee's report to the HOA board. The report acknowledged the environmental benefits of Mr. Miller's solar panel and its minimal impact on the community's aesthetic. However, it also emphasized the importance of upholding the HOA bylaws and preserving the community's overall harmony. The committee recommended that Mr. Miller be granted a variance, but with certain conditions. The solar panel would have to be painted a shade of beige that matched the color of his roof, and it would have to be screened by a row of strategically placed shrubs. Mr. Finch, after a moment of deliberation, announced the board's decision. Mr. Miller's variance was approved, subject to the committee's conditions. The decision was met with a mixture of relief and disappointment. Some residents felt that the compromise was a fair and reasonable solution. Others felt that it was a victory for conformity over innovation. Mr. Miller, though initially reluctant to paint his solar panel beige, ultimately accepted the compromise. He recognized that, in a community like Harmony Glade, progress was often achieved through small steps and incremental changes. The beige solar panel, now partially obscured by shrubs, became a subtle reminder of the delicate balance between order and individuality, conformity and creativity. It was a symbol of Harmony Glade's ongoing struggle to reconcile its desire for perfection with the messy, unpredictable realities of human life. Life in Harmony Glade continued, though perhaps with a slightly altered rhythm. The playground equipment was eventually painted meadow green. The row bird feeder was relocated to a less conspicuous spot, and Mr. Henderson's hedges were trimmed to the regulation length. But something had shifted in the community, a subtle shift in perspective. The residents had learned that even in a place as meticulously planned as Harmony Glade, there was room for individuality, for innovation, for the occasional splash of color in a sea of beige. Mrs. Ainsworth, As she continued to meticulously record the minutes of the HOA meetings, noticed a subtle change in the tone of the discussions. There was a greater willingness to listen, to compromise, to embrace the diversity of opinions and perspectives. Harmony Glade, it seemed, was slowly learning to embrace its imperfections, to recognize that true harmony was not about uniformity, but about finding a way to coexist with the messy, beautiful, and ultimately human aspects of life.